During a recent Discord Q&A for Gotham Knights, one of the questions that was the most popular that was asked of the developers was regarding the villain side quests. That's been one of the big selling points that the developers have been discussing in the marketing, in the demos, in all of the lead up to the release of this game, is that outside of the main story featuring the Court of Owls, there will be a number of side missions that are pretty extensive and pretty long and will provide a full arc and a full narrative for each of these side villains. And the question was if we can expect to see more than the 3 villains that we've seen advertised. So of course in the main story we've seen the Court of Owls. It looks like Penguin plays a role, and I'm sure that there are other villains that we have not seen in that main story, but then for side content we have seen Harley Quinn, Clayface, and Mr. Freeze. And so, again, the question was just, are those the only 3? Can we expect to see more? And the answer has left a lot of people scratching their heads and a lot of people disappointed, as the answer seems to almost be yes, these will be the only 3 side quests that really have full arcs and full narratives for villains outside of the main story. So if the way that this answer is being interpreted is correct, that means Scarecrow, Bane, Hush, Poison Ivy, none of those characters will have a side quest in the game of their own. However, I think that it is perhaps being jumped the gun on just a bit in terms of how people are interpreting this response, because the response essentially reads, yes, this trio of villains has a lot of unfinished work in Gotham, and of course we have the Court of Owls that will keep the Knights busy. So yes, I do think that that is a very potentially viable reading of Gotham Knights, is that, yep, they are sort of confirming, don't expect a ton of other villains to pop up in the city. We're kind of showing all of our cards in that regard. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing if that does turn out to be the case, because in the Arkham games, there was always a pretty high quantity of villains in each game. But I do think that then you ran into that problem where there were a lot of villains in the Arkham games that you really wished got more attention. I think Clayface is a good example. Here we're getting a full, probably 2 to 4 hour long side mission with him, where we'll really get to see development for that character. Whereas in Arkham City, he pops up, he's part of the plot twist, and then you have one encounter with him. I think that it will be really exciting for each villain to really get some time to shine and a really strong narrative behind them. Again, I think that what Arkham did was great. I think Gotham Knights might just be going in a different direction, in the sense that in the Arkham games, there were a lot of villains that popped up, and Gotham was very populated with a high quantity of villains. And maybe Gotham Knights is going to forsake that to a degree so that the villains they do pull in, they can do justice to every single time. Again, Arkham did a great job, but you did have those villains here and there. Or, you look at Arkham City where you had Deadshot and Bane in that game, but their side missions felt underwhelming to a degree. But I do see the point of it being argued, like at least they were there. It was fun to at least see them in that game. So I do understand why this potential news is disappointing people. Again, I do think that there's another way to read this though, which is they could just be keeping a lot of it secret still. They don't really want to show all their cards. I also think it's not necessarily fair to jump to conclusions about the city not feeling densely populated with villains when we know next to nothing about the main story. And I think that, speaking of the main story, that's another thing we can really read into here, which is this is a Court of Owls experience. The Court of Owls is the villain that Warner Brothers Games Montreal has been leaning heavily into. It is the villain that has been part of this project. Even since it was a Damian Wayne-based Arkham game, the Court of Owls was going to be in that project, and then that was famously canceled and rebooted internally to Gotham Knights, and the Court of Owls is still the fundamental piece that has been carried over. There's been other things, such as the Batbike was originally in that project that's been brought over into Gotham Knights, and I know I am getting a little bit off topic here just because, again, if you're not aware, Gotham Knights originally was going to be a follow-up to Arkham Knight that starred Damian Wayne. That project was canceled, and we are getting Gotham Knights, which is a reboot of the Arkham games, and I do just see that possibility there of them really wanting to change the direction with which they play with the villains of Batman's Rogues Gallery. Batman has a great Rogues Gallery, and I think that what makes them great is the individual stories that they all bring to the table. And so in order for this base product to be a really fundamentally great Batman experience, I could see them cutting a lot of the fat in terms of filler content. I could see them looking at villains that they may have originally had in the game, like let's say Bane and Deathstroke were there, and they just weren't quite getting them right. They didn't feel that they were really adding to the experience, and instead were just dragging out the playtime. I could see them looking looking at that and saying we don't want to add these characters if we can't do them correctly and just removing them. The other possibility that I could see, and I will talk about this more in a separate video, is that of potential DLC. I do see there being a very real possibility that in the base game there will be 3 villain quests, you'll have your 4 playable characters, but that in the months after Gotham Knights is released, maybe they'll start advertising, oh, are you guys interested in a Bane side mission? Because that is going to be part of the season pass. You know, the $20 to $40 season pass will come with 3 to 6 more villain side missions throughout the city, and it will come with 4 additional playable characters. It will come with another campaign that you can play through. It's shorter, but it's another campaign that will be attached to Gotham Knights now. And I know that they've said that this isn't a games as a service, but I do see there being the loophole in the sense that Gotham Knights is a fully functional product at launch. It's a fully complete packaged Gotham experience that they may just add to in the future. It feels like they have provided a very strong fundamental base to branch out and add content in the future through DLC, and maybe they'll look for villains that fans are requesting the most, and those will be the villains that they add into the game in the future. Now, I'm certainly not saying that that's my preferred way of bringing more villains into the game, nor is that me necessarily saying that I'm satisfied if these are the only 3 villain side quests in the game. But again, I'm not wanting to get upset about this until I've actually played through the experience. Maybe there are more villains, maybe there are more side missions featuring big Batman villains that just don't have that full 2 to 4 hour long story arc. Maybe Two-Face and Hush will have just very brief encounters that you can have in the open world. Or maybe those will be more based around collectibles where you get a boss fight with them at the end, or maybe you can go to Arkham Asylum and visit other criminals who are still locked up. Maybe every villain isn't out and about in Gotham right now, but their presence will still exist in some form or another. I am interested in what they're doing here. It's a very different approach than what Arkham did with their villains, and I was a huge fan of what Arkham did with their villains, so I think it remains to be seen if this new approach will work for me. And I mean, for all we know, they could be keeping a ton of things under wraps still, and we still don't know what is going to occur in the main story. We don't know everything about the open world, but again, the big point I want to drive home is this is a Court of Owls based experience, and the Court of Owls isn't one character. It is essentially a whole underground army that you are going to be taking on, and I think that that is really going to bleed into those enemy types that you're going to fight around the city. You, of course, have all the different thugs and all the different factions of thugs around the city as well. And so this is a game that seems to be really leaning into the criminal ecosystem of Gotham and how the Court of Owls will really impact that as they come to the surface and as they come to light. And so it's not necessarily a story that's trying to do what the Arkham games did, where it was about Batman and all of his rogues kind of being in a confined area and hashing it out, usually in a prison scenario in Arkham Asylum or Arkham City. And then Arkham Origins is kind of the origins of Batman's relationships with a lot of the major villains. And then Arkham Knight was kind of the big finale. And so, of course, there were a lot of villains in each of those because that was what those stories were trying to entail. Gotham Knights, on the other hand, is a story about you as Batman's previous sidekicks now having to come to the forefront and take his place in building your own dynamics in Gotham. And maybe having too many villains around the city could take away from that, and maybe this is a game that is more about the dynamics of the Bat family rather than how many villains could just be put in, just for the sake of it. Again, I'm a huge sucker for the Batman Rogues Gallery, and I will say that there's a lot of villains that I hope show up in Gotham Knights. I recently did a video with Luke Wayne talking about that, and again, if the reading of this is correct that there are only 3 major side missions with villains, I will be somewhat disappointed. I'm not necessarily anticipating that being the case. I don't know that with how big they've advertised Gotham to be and with how full of crime it is and how true to the Batman mythology it is, I don't know that I buy that there isn't more that they haven't revealed to us yet. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if they're planning on adding more playable characters and more villain side quests down the line so that there's more content to play through when we do get those new characters that they might potentially add through DLC. Again, that is another video for another day, but those are my thoughts regarding this answer in the Discord Q&A. So please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what you are thinking about the villain situation. Are you happy with the notion of them just having a few villains that they really flesh out, or would you prefer they go back to just putting in a ton of Batman villains? Again, I think that the Arkham games handled their villains really well, and so looking at it from a potentially different approach, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. We're going to have to play the game next week. It's coming out a week from today. We're going to see how I feel about it, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as well. I am really looking forward to Gotham Knights and all the villains, and particularly what they're going to do with the Court of Owls. So again, please be sure to like and subscribe. I will be covering this game all the way up until launch and post-launch as well. But that's it for now. We will see you guys in the next one.